Hello and welcome once again to Dave and Marlow, Blazers Edge podcast covering the Portland Trail Blazers and the NBA. I'm Dave Deckard here together with Marlow Ferguson Jr. And we are now, as we speak, at the point of having seen Game 3 of the finals. You and I will not see Game 4, have not seen Game 4 yet, I should say. This will air a day after. But Denver came back in Miami and had some amazing performances from Nikola Jokic, Jamal Murray, and took the home court advantage back. Quick questions to start with. First of all, what did you see from that game that's interesting? And do you think that home court is important?
To answer your first question, I think that when you're building a dynamic duo, a 1-2 punch for the NBA, I think that's exactly what you want to see is what Nikola Jokic.
We can wish, right?
Yeah, Nikola Jokic and Jamal Murray, the first guys ever to have 30-point triple-doubles in the same game, like ever, in NBA history. So I think when you're a front office, that's exactly what you want to see. And then kind of what we talked about before with just the three-point variance. We talked about how, Strus and those guys, they would get hot, but how could they do that over the course of a full series? And in Game 3, they kind of reverted back to what we've seen before. Shot 11 for 35. I think the free throw issue is still going to be an issue with the second unit. They didn't get a single free throw across. Was it 9 or 10 guys that played off the bench? So just some concerning factors that just continue to surface for Miami. And I think that it's going to end up being what cost them their season. I can see it going to 6 games, but I think Denver's the better team, and they've kind of proven it.
Well, I mean, Miami is missing one of their main players in Tyler Hero, too, which would have helped. But I think you're right. I mean, I think the three-point shooting or the shooting in general is telling the story. And I think part of that is Denver's defense, but I think part of that is just this is Miami. It's like you reach a point where you're at the end of the marathon and you need that last burst of energy or whatever it is that Miami's had. They're getting it less consistently now than they were earlier. In fact, if you go back to that Boston series, they lost 3 games before they won Game 7. And it might have been like 2 or 3 weeks by now since Miami has really played what you'd call dominant basketball, at least for an extended period of time. So you may be seeing the engine sputtering out here, which is kind of sad because I think if they had one more player and a little more shooting, that this could be epic. But right now it looks like Denver is taking the lead or taking the edge. I don't know. I think Miami still has a chance, but they're going to have to shoot real well to bail themselves out of this, what ends up being a de facto slump at the end of the season.
Yeah, it's almost as if they're driving and they're just going through the yellows. They're not necessarily at a full go. And it's tough to do that against a team like Denver. And for me, I think it's hard for a Tiger to kind of change his stripes in the middle of a final series. They've kind of built an identity on what they like to do. And Denver's the kind of team that they can, if they're on their game, they're playing aggressively, which was the problem in Game 2. They play aggressively and they close the games out. I don't think that Miami has enough of a counter. With as great as Eric Spoelstra is, I don't know if they have a counter to deal with everything that Denver can throw at them. There's not a singular player that can guard Nikola Jokic. And I thought in Game 2, after what Jimmy Butler's defense did against Jamal Murray, I thought that maybe they had something there, but even that wasn't sustainable for a 2-game stretch. So that's tough too. And I think that having veterans is key too. As you saw with Jeff Green at the end of that game, he was letting them know, hey, finish it out and don't get complacent now, don't get comfortable now. And just having guys like that, everybody knows their role from the stars to the bottom of the bench. Christian Brown, guys like that. Like you can't say enough about Denver at this point. And there's a reason why they're 2 games away from a championship now.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to overcome. I mean, look, you don't expect, Max Strus and Gabe Vincent to save your finals series. But it's hard to ignore 2 for 10 from Vincent and 1 for 7 shooting from Strus. That's already a deficit. And then you got Adebayo shooting 7 for 21, and that's your center. Okay, that's the guy who should be hitting 50% minimum. There's you're not going to get over that wall. But even if they shot slightly better, and I think this is where it's indicative for Portland that you have to be careful because if you want a championship, you can't just win a playoff series. You have to be able to win every playoff series you actually get, which means being able to at least forecast winning the foreseeable ones, any of them. And you're looking at Adebayo, who's an incredible defensive center, and one of the players that if the Blazers got him, you'd think that would be a fantastic get, right? But even if you got him now, okay, you're running up against Denver. In years to come, are you running up against San Antonio with a dominant center? Los Angeles Lakers, if they stay together. There are some big centers in the West here, and there are enough of them where you can't go, well, I'm going to dodge all of them in the playoffs. Nobody's guarding Jokic, period, like you said. But Adebayo can't do anything with him at this point that's going to make a difference. Porting that to your team is not going to change that particular story. It's going to make you better overall, but if you hit Denver, you're going to run into this kind of problem too. And all your machinations are going to go for naught. It's just a matter of when you're going to get out of the playoffs, not if. The Blazers saw this, of course, back in the day when they lost I think it was, they lost to the Lakers, right? And then they got Dale Davis to fix their Shaq problem. And Dale Davis did not fix their Shaq problem. In fact, it actually made it worse. So, like, you can go and Davis, by the way, was an all-star, all-defensive player, all those things, right? But he was not stopping Shaq. And the Blazers could end up doing part two by getting, an undersized center who's defensive and whatever, and still not end up going all the way. So anyway, that's a long-winded way of saying there's a cautionary tale in this.
And to your point, I kind of remember them getting Sean Kemp too, and saying that his size was there to match up with Shaq too in the post, and I don't recall that working out either. But it's just, I think that's just kind of how it goes when you're dealing with a generational talent. With a guy like Nikola Jokic, you can try to get close, and I think Bam historically he's played really well against Nikola Jokic, but when you put very good against great, it doesn't really tend to work out in your favor in that way. And with Bam, I look at his shot attempts. Game one, I think most people would say he played a great game, all things considered. But I think Denver would even live with that. He scored 26 points, but it took him 25 shots to get it. So, they'll gladly trade off that with three-pointers and getting to the line, as Miami didn't do. So, just thinking about it like that, it's a situation that we saw with Michael Jordan and LeBron James, guys like that, where teams are going out trying to get guys that have the so-called archetype and the characteristics to stop them. And if it doesn't happen, you just spend some money on hope. And Portland's they've done that before. They spent money on hope. We've seen them go out and spend lavishly on swingmen and defensive stoppers that didn't save the day. They didn't change the defensive culture. So I think it's nothing new for the NBA, and you're just fortunate to see another team have to deal with it this time instead of Portland. So.
Well, and the scary thing about Denver is that they only took, 18 three-pointers in that game 3, and they only hit 5 of them. They shot under 30% from distance, which is, you'd think would be anathema in today's NBA. But they're so dang efficient that it's like the engine's going to run no matter what. And if one of the tires is slightly flat, they just keep going. And the thing is, you have to keep up with them at all times. If your engine stops, they're already gone. And I thought, rebounding too. I mean, another evidence that they're actually a very Aaron Gordon and Jokic, scary tandem. And remember back in the day, like we were talking, I'm not sure you were here yet, but we were talking about how good of a get Aaron Gordon would be for Portland, because he brings some size and some athleticism. And the Blazers didn't get him. Denver did. And everybody's going, that's a good get. And then, well, it's so-so. And now you're really seeing it. I'm not sure that you can go undersized the way Miami is and the way really Portland is. If you lose that rebounding battle, the stat has been denigrated a little bit, like, oh, anybody can rebound. Yeah, anybody can rebound until you don't. And then when you can't rebound, you see how important that was. It's just that everybody had the baseline, so it looked neutral. But as soon as you go super small and you start giving up the battle of the rebounds, you lose tempo, you lose extra shots and rhythm. And all of a sudden, it doesn't matter what the other team is doing. Everything they do gives them the edge.
Yeah, and it kind of reminds me of a lot of Portland games went this year where they ran zone defense and they weren't disciplined enough to get back and rebound and whatnot. So it's something to think about there. But I'm 100% with you on Aaron Gordon. I always think back to that postseason series that Denver and Portland had a few years ago where they put him on Lillard and he was able to stop him as well as anybody else could. So I think he's definitely staking his claim as one of the league's most underrated players, if not the most. And I'll tell you another thing that kind of scares me about it. Before Game 3, Michael Porter Jr. was talking to the media and he was saying, like, I'm not going to continue to miss three-pointers at the rate that I did. And sure enough, in Game 3, he actually did miss those three-pointers again. But he's a ticking time bomb. It's only a matter of time before he gets going. And when you have a team with this much talent, you know, you may be able to stop Murray on a certain night, but being able to stop Michael Porter, and different guys like that, it's going to be tough too. So it's just so many different weapons this team can bring to you. And having a star player, two star players that are willing to get those guys the ball, I think it's going to be doubly important for Miami to try to figure out how to stop that. But if there's a way to do it, you know, consistently, I'm not sure that they found a way to do that just yet.
Right. Well, I mean, we'll hope that they start hitting threes. I'll stick with my pick of Miami because like I said, I made it before the conference finals. So it's not looking very good right now, but hey, you know, Denver's great. Let's move to Portland. Well, actually, let's move to Phoenix. Apparently, Phoenix is going to waive Chris Paul, and that's an interesting move. No doubt occasioned by their midseason pickup of Kevin Durant. And now all of a sudden they got a little too much going on at the small positions. They're not going to save any money. They're going to bail him out. But I mean, Paul has been injured off and on, but still a valuable player. Talk a little bit about the rationale behind letting him go, but also how tempting of a free agent now is Chris Paul, available at a veteran minimum contract for a team next year.
I think it's definitely tempting. I'm not sure that it's tempting for the Portland Trailblazers. I don't know that he has a fit there, but he can still play. You know, he's 37 years old. He came along, you know, at different points of the season, but the injury history is just a little bit too much to kind of think about. And I think just overall, it's really tough to see the fall from grace for Phoenix. You know, you wouldn't have anticipated this being the case. You know, a few weeks ago when they acquired Kevin Durant, you maybe thought they were going to have a 2 to 3 year championship window with Chris Paul, Devin Booker, and those guys. And I would just say this: I think the move has Los Angeles Lakers written all over it. I think that there's a real possibility that he goes there, and chases the championship there. And I don't really see too many other options that fit his timeline, being his age and trying to win that championship and playing with guys that with Chris Paul, you have to have a slow-paced team. Pick and roll heavy team. So I think a situation like that is going to benefit him where he can kind of pick his own spot and see what he can do there.
I mean, Lakers, Clippers, Heat would be the three that I would say would be strong possibilities, maybe in that order. Although I think, you know, going back to the Clippers might be an attractive possibility for him too, somewhere in LA. I mean, he shot 44% from the field, which is low for him, but decent for a guard. 37, almost 38% from the 3-point arc. He's absolutely got juice left, which is, by the way, incredible when you think of how long he's played and at what level he's played. To be 37 years old and still doing this is pretty amazing. I'm a little bit shocked that the Suns would just waive him, would just get rid of him. I wonder what the story is. I mean, because you're going to pay him anyway. You have to buy him out. If you're paying the money anyway, why would you not want the player? But I think that's going to be a huge bonus for, and by the way, it's going to be, there's a reason. It's not just these teams, but look, all three of them kind of sandbag the regular season, which Paul needs to do, right? He needs to take time off. The Clippers are the kings of load management. But you also have the Lakers and the Heat. You know, Jimmy Butler didn't even show up for half the season. Nobody's going to blink an eye at that. They're going to say, as long as you can go in the postseason, let's do it. And I think he's going to fit like a glove one of those places.
Yeah, I think if there's a player that I won't say deserves load management, but should absolutely 100% be have his managed load, I think it's Chris Paul. You know, we've seen him break down with his hamstring and thighs and leg injuries and things like that feels like every single postseason. And according to Chris Haynes, you know, he intends to play multiple different years. So if he's giving you 3 or 4 more years in the NBA and still trying to win a championship, I think whoever takes him on has to be really smart about how they do it. You know, historically, Phoenix, even last year, they played him over 30 minutes a game. He was and he played some heavy minutes. So I think whatever team takes him on, I think you play him 25 minutes, try to ease him in, and then maybe ramp it up later toward the end of the season where you can get him ready for the postseason. But it's tough. It's tough because he's a player that I think even without being a fan of his, you want to see him get at least one chance to be healthy down the stretch, this toward the end of his career and maybe win a championship. But I don't know. I think, the Lakers and Clippers would be the 2 teams that would be the most fun. I think it'd be a lot of fun to see him and with the Clippers again and Harden with the Rockets and just kind of going old school with this. So. Yeah.
I mean, and that some people have asked about Portland. I think, as you said, there's no fit there, but also why would he come to Portland? I mean, why that? I'm not saying Paul's big timing Portland. It's just like there's no room in the guard rotation and the Blazers aren't close to contending. So why would you want to, if you could sign a veteran minimum contract anywhere except Phoenix, why would you choose Portland? It doesn't make any sense. So there are teams with holes at the point guard spot where he would be beloved. And, he loved LA. That's where he wanted to engineer a trade to in the first place. So Lakers first and Clippers were your second choice. So I don't think that that's changed. That'll be interesting. Do you see Paul making a difference for one of those 2 teams? I mean, the Lakers underperformed during the regular season, but got to the conference finals. The Clippers just underperformed throughout. Do you think Paul could make the difference between them where they are and making a leap towards a ring?
Oh, absolutely. I think back to the Western Conference Finals and the Lakers starting point guard, D'Angelo Russell. They essentially played him off the court. You know, he just didn't have the defensive IQ and the smarts in order to stay on the court. And Jamal Murray and those guys, they executed and took him out. And I think to boot, you sort of seen him kind of pressing on offense where he was taking more shots than normal and not really, being smart about it. So I think if you get a chance to get Chris Paul in that mix, I think it definitely makes all the difference. You know, I'm not saying he's going to be the guy that takes him over the top, but if you're going into a series against Denver, I think you'd much rather have a veteran all-star caliber point guard that can still turn it on for a night and have a vintage performance. You know, we're not necessarily too far removed from his incredible 2021 finals run. So I think he's definitely still got some juice. I'm kind of interested to see what it means for DeAndre Ayton and whatnot. But as far as Chris Paul goes, I think he definitely make a huge difference to either one of those teams, especially given the injury history and the inconsistency that they have at the point guard position.
Yeah, I wonder if this bodes well for Phoenix keeping Ayton, just because, that's a large talent dump. I mean, you got rid of your coach sight unseen, basically. And then you waive Paul. And if you trade away Ayton for anything less than immediate veteran help, and remember, when we talked about the Blazers, we were like, well, maybe number 3 and, Nurkic or whatever would do it. But you assumed that the lineup was still star-studded, right? But now they've just got Booker and Durant, and that's it. So, I mean, obviously I shouldn't say that's it. That's a hell of a duo, but you know what I mean. It feels like they're going to keep that third young, talented player there at this point, because otherwise, boy, their bench was already kind of shaky, and now their starting lineup, if they lose Ayton, would be just as shaky.
Yeah, I think they're very much so on the verge of being a cautionary tale for, younger franchises, because if you look at it now, they've basically given away 4 unprotected first-round picks. Cam Johnson, Mikal Bridges, all of that. You just got rid of a 60-win head coach, traded for a aging 34, 35-year-old superstar in Kevin Durant. And basically you mortgage your entire depth just for those 2 now. So, I mean, if it doesn't work out, you're looking at a really, really bleak situation in which you've gone from a pretty promising young team to a aging team that, maybe it's running out of answers. I don't want to diminish what they've done. I think they still got a chance to be a championship team next year, which is the case when you have 2 all-star caliber players like that. But just thinking about how much they've lost and how much their scenery has changed in just a matter of weeks, it's kind of concerning. I've definitely got my eyes on that situation because I thought that they were going to be the NBA champion this season. So it'd be fun to see how that plays out.
Yep. All right. Well, moving to the Trailblazers then, I mean, the big fracas this week was, okay, so Damian Lillard goes on Showtime Sports and they ask him, hey, if you were to be traded, and we should preface this, and we did on site by saying, they asked him if he expects to be in Portland at the start of the season, and he said yes. Okay, so that hasn't changed. But they said, if you were to be traded, what would be some of your favorite destinations? And he said, well, Miami, obviously, and Brooklyn has a quality roster as well. Which then, of course, started a firestorm that CJ McCollum added to. He was asked on ESPN about this interview, and McCollum suggested that not only would those be good destinations, but the Blazers were really at an inflection point and needed to decide what to do, and that the Damian Lillard trade talk is more real right now than it has been at any time in the past, even though this is like the fourth time that it's come up. And then, of course, Yusuf Nurkic goes on Twitter and says, well, the Blazers basically better come through this summer or we're all getting traded. So there was a little, obviously, you're in a little bit of a gap between the draft lottery and the actual draft where there's an echo chamber for these things to resonate. But this is still a lot of fire stoking around this. Did any of it strike you? What do you make of this?
I'm taking it with the utmost respect. You know, I think where there's smoke, there's fire. You know, I can sit here and talk about, you know, what I think is going to happen with the Blazers, but when you have players that have played in that culture, in that environment, and know the front office, and they're saying this and then putting the pressure on the front office that way, I think it definitely means something. And I think back to Lillard's back and forth that he had with Brian Custer during that interview. He brought up Miami on two different occasions, so I think it's definitely something that's on his mind when they asked him about what the hypothetical teams, and then he talked about the veterans that he wished that Portland had, and he talked about guys like Udonis Haslem and how Miami does it with their culture. So I think it's something to definitely be looking at. And as CJ McCollum said, you know, they've definitely got the pieces in place now to where they can either move on and give Dame a fresh start, or, you know, try to run it back and add some players. But as we've talked about many times on this podcast, you know, it's kind of hard to imagine what they're going to be able to get. You know, the Siakam, Brown, those guys continue to come up, but you know, nothing's really happened just yet. So I think I don't know. Nurkic just saying they need to come through. What is coming through? What does that mean? What is, like, how do you define that? So I think I take it with the utmost respect, and I think it's something that can definitely happen. But, you know, until it happens, and I'm kind of just waiting to see it.
Yeah, I mean, Miami's problem, of course, would be what would they trade for? I mean, it'd have to be Kyle Lowry and Tyler Hero. That's the salary matchup, which makes Portland go, yeah. And then I imagine there'd have to be a Phoenix-like level of draft picks coming back. Probably not the entire barrage that went for Kevin Durant, but there better be at least a couple unprotected picks coming later for that. You know, that would be a grim situation for Portland. I don't foresee Miami having the ability to make the Blazers bite on that, but I guess you never know. And by the way, I guess there's a shade to this that we haven't talked about. I think Damian Lillard can force a trade, but I don't think Damian Lillard can force the trade. In other words, Clyde Drexler had one destination. Even Chris Paul had one or two destinations back in the day when he was forcing trades. Damian Lillard's under contract long term. I don't think that he can force a trade to a specific team if the return isn't right for the Blazers. Because A, they want to keep him, and B, they can't afford to lose him for anything that's not going to have a chance to reinvigorate their franchise significantly. And yes, they have loyalty to Dame, and they'll want to make sure he goes to a place where he's wanted and he's happy. But that only goes so far, especially when the guy you have loyalty to is the one forcing a trade away from you. I don't see the Dame being able to strong arm them into Lowry and Hero and a future protected pick just because I want to go to Miami.
Yeah, and it's tough to say. You know, I think he's made it a little bit more difficult with him being as public as he's been about it, and kind of messing up a little bit of Portland's leverage with it. I think he's already kind of said he wouldn't go to Boston. So, you know, it kind of leaves him on a short list of teams where if he's trying to win a championship, you know, it's going to be tough. And if Miami is his ideal fit, you know, as you said, do they have enough? You know, I've seen some hypothetical trades where they've had, you Harrow and Caleb Martin and a bunch of draft picks and whatnot, things like that. But I don't think that necessarily moves the needle, and if Brooklyn's the team that he's thinking about going to, we've seen the Mikal Bridges, those things come back up too. I don't know. I think he's going to have to kind of open that list up a little bit more because maybe there's not a perfect team at the top, especially with Miami and whatnot. But, we'll see how it goes. I think that there's something that both sides can do. But I think one side's going to end up losing a little bit more than they maybe expected to in the process.
Now, Brooklyn has more players under contract that they can mess with. I mean, they have Ben Simmons, they have Spencer Dinwiddie, Joe Harris, even Dorian Finney-Smith could factor in there. And the Blazers might even want Nick Claxton. The thing is that none of those players move the needle enough, and some are detriments thrown in just because of their huge salaries. But the problem is that Brooklyn's future draft picks aren't going to be as good because they're a younger team, right? So it's like if you get an unprotected Miami pick 5 years down the road, you're going, well, that generation's going to be gone. This could be pretty good. Unprotected Brooklyn pick down the road, you're going, well, Bridges is still going to be there. Outside chance Lillard could be there. Claxton will still be there if he's not traded. You're probably looking mid-first round. You're not excited by that. So it's almost like the two teams have inverse problems there.
Yeah, and I think about something else Lillard said where he was basically saying that, hey, I'm 32 years old. I'm still basically in the prime of my career. Like he's basically saying that, like everybody else is saying that he's too old to do what he's doing. So I think you just kind of hope that the other franchises will hear that and maybe think about it this way, because that's been the big thing is for Portland, can you get the most out of what you can get out of a so-called aging superstar? And on the other side, other teams are going to be hesitant about that too. So, I think that's something to think about too with just the age factor and how that goes and whatnot. But I think there's a situation out there. I don't know that Brooklyn is the one, just because of what they had to give up in order to bring on Mikal Bridges and having all those draft picks and whatnot. So it'll be interesting to see. I'm trying to think of what other teams would be on the board. I think it's a really, really, really short list of teams that can contend right away that Lillard would want to go to. So I don't know. I think the more realistic situation is he maybe either Portland or Miami. Out of those two, it's I don't know.
Yep. I mean, and either way, it's all about the future compensation, I think. That you're not going to replace Lillard in the immediate. So, and especially okay, now you got to take Ben Simmons coming back. I mean, paired with Lillard, you might find a role for Simmons put among this young team. It's like, oh my gosh, the team doesn't have an identity anyway. They're finding their way. And now you get the guy whose identity has Jekyll and Hyde so much over the last 3 years, but he became a poster child for CBA negotiations about what you don't want players doing to you. So, yeah, I mean, there's a lot going on there. This is the problem with where Portland is. I don't see a clear path to a happy resolution with Damian staying. I'm not sure there's a clear path to a happy resolution with Damian going either, but we can fall back on what we said before. There's always a trade available for a player of Lillard's caliber, that the league is not going to shrug and let him go. Somebody is going to make an offer that looks pretty good. It's just hard to see what that's going to be.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think every single offseason you have GMs and front offices that are on the hot seat and need to find some way to make a big move to, at least give off the impression in the summer and get some of that optimism that, you're chasing the championship. So as long as teams are under pressure, I think there's always going to be someone that takes a bite at it. So we'll see. Maybe the Lakers find some way to do it. They have, limitless cap space, as it would seem. So they always kind of find a way to do what they do. Maybe they take a shot at it. We'll see.
Yeah.
It's hard to say right now.
I guess if they can't get Chris Paul, that would be, Lillard on the Lakers would be really interesting with LeBron and Davis sitting there. I don't see how they do it, but and also, they've given up a lot of picks, so they don't, obviously every year that goes by, though, another future pick comes available. So I don't know. We'll see. So today, as we speak, too, John Hollinger comes out and says the Blazers should not re-sign Jerami Grant, that they should let him go on the free agent market. Do you see any sense in that?
Not really. Based on what we talked about before, like what would the incentive be? Basically, if you do that, you basically let him walk for nothing. So I think I kind of feel like you kind of have to bring him back, and take a chance on that. And he's still a good player. You're not probably going to find anything better than him on that free agent market for for what you're trying to do right now. So I think you take a chance on it. I think you maybe said it a week or two ago, or somebody said it where they were basically saying that you might have to pay him a little bit more, but I think you bring him back. I think you bring him back.
If they don't bring him back, Dame's gone, right? Like you cannot go, all right, well, we're going to get somebody, but we're going to trade away players to do it. So we're going to lose depth. And now we're going to lose Jerami Grant as well. That's not that would be a very unserious move, right?
Yeah, that's a move that you make on your first day on the job right there. I can't really see a situation in which that plays out like that. But I'm with you. If it happens like that, I can't see a situation in which Damian Lillard keeps faith in this franchise, and it sends a message that they're trying to win later, which is the exact opposite of what he's trying to do now. So I'm full on with that.
Yeah, because that would leave literally Lillard and Nurkic as the only players above like 25 on the team. I mean, Thibault, but it's like he's down there though. They've already got exactly three players that aren't babies. And it's like you lose one of them for nothing. That would be telegraphing that you are rebuilding at this point.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it wouldn't be any different from what they kind of did at the trade deadline, where they brought on more young players and then decided to just worry about the contracts later. But I don't know. I don't agree with the idea of letting him walk for nothing. I think he called it, was it bat crazy or something like that? Whatever it was that he said. But I don't think it's crazy. I don't think it's crazy to bring him back.
Well, yeah, it would be crazy to not bring him back. I mean, you're losing the trade chip too. I don't see how Hollinger misses this unless he thinks he's going to be so overpaid that he cannot be traded. But that contract's going to expire at some point. Even at the end of it, you're going to be able to move it because someone will want a 32-year-old Jerami Grant. So, yeah, I don't understand any rationale other than we quit for not bringing Grant back. Yeah, I mean, it's funny because the Blazers, it's not just that they're in no man's land and they're stuck in this limbo before the draft. It's that literally their wheels are up halfway in the muck. And every time you try to gun them, it's just throwing more mud. And boy, I hope Joe Cronin can get some cat litter or 2x4 or something underneath there to get some traction out of that. Because right now, it's this conflicting reports from analysts and conflicting questions to Dame, and half the league is saying, well, they're going to build around Dame, and half the league is saying Dame's gone. And nobody knows what's going on with them. It's less about the Blazers than the situation that they're in. And they've gotten themselves into such, I don't want to say uncharted territory, but such confusing territory that very few people can find the next step even, let alone the long distance plan.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I mean, even for us, like we talk about this team every week. We analyze them and whatnot. But even for us, it's kind of hard to see what's going on next because they haven't really made a clear cut decision on what they want to do. Do you want to win now? Do you want to win later? They've kind of made small moves to try to stay in the same spot, but there's nothing that lets you know either way it goes that they're trying to either chase championship now and bulk up their roster for that, or if they want to just go young and start over. I think we'll know a little bit more when the draft comes, and seeing what happens with that number 3 pick and whatnot. But for now, everybody's kind of biding their time. I think including the front office, and nobody really knows what's going on yet. But maybe something happens, maybe something changes, in between then. But I don't know. It's hard to say right now. Just kind of observing it.
Yeah, I mean, we can tell you, at least I can tell you what they should do. They should rebuild at this point, right? I mean, the steps to building around Dame, unless such an obvious deal comes that you cannot refuse it, the incremental step is not going to work, probably. The only one that would tempt me that we've talked about is that Turner for 6 and a Thompson brother for the number 3 pick and like Nurkic. Okay, I would do that. I would consider that an incremental upgrade, but that's like one possibility among 100. I don't see this revolution that gets Dame a ring here. I see Dame having value. I think, the obvious choice is that they will or should rebuild. The only bar to that, the only reason everybody's not saying that is that the front office is swearing up and down that that's not what they want to do.
Yeah, I think you could be on something there. I think it's something to think about because, every year since that Western Conference Finals run, we've come into the offseason and told ourselves, okay, we need one or two more pieces and we're there. When Nurkic went down and Whiteside came along, okay, we got some depth there. We brought in Covington and Derrick Jones Jr. and guys like that. Okay, we've got the perimeter defenders. So every year we kind of talk ourselves into this being, a big potential year, and every year it kind of works out the same. It's either a first round exit or a disappointing season in which you don't even make it to April where you're competing. So I don't know. I think at some point maybe you get tired of talking yourself into having those rose-colored glasses on and thinking that this is the year and it not being the year at all. And maybe you just try something different, where you expect to lose right away and kind of build on that in the future. So I can see both sides of it, both perspectives of it. It's interesting to think about, though.
Well, not even Damian Lillard, and this is where we can circle back to where we jumped off here. Not even Damian Lillard is buying this anymore, right? I mean, the Blazers are on a clock with him. CJ McCollum isn't buying it based on his comments. And Yusuf Nurkic isn't buying it either. So, like, the players are starting to get to this point. And one of them has a lot of control over his own destiny in Lillard and will be able to tell you that he wants out. And his is the only decision that matters. So, everybody hears Dame saying, I want to stay in Portland. I expect to stay in Portland. Okay, I hear that. But what I hear just as loud is the Blazers have promised me that they're going to do something, and I need them to do something. And if that something isn't done, I don't think that I expect to stay in Portland is going to hold up. That one of those is a desire. The other is a demonstrated reality. And the demonstrated reality part is what the Blazers have to show. If that isn't shown, the desire will not sustain.
Yeah, it does seem as they've lost their biggest supporter in all of this, and Damian Lillard. His messages and his candid interviews have gotten a lot more frequent and a lot more transparent in terms of what he's kind of expecting and what he wants to see. 2 or 3 years ago, you wouldn't anticipate him coming into an extra interview and basically saying he's not interested in rebuilding and whatnot. It was always for the franchise. So I think now it's like McCollum and Nurkic and those guys have said. I think if there's a year to do it, I think this is the one. I think both sides kind of deserve a fresh start, and I don't think that we can look back on this as a failure per se because it was an incredible run of 11 years of fun basketball to watch, deep playoff runs, big shots, great highlights, and things like that. But even the fan base, I get the feeling that they want to see something new too. Not necessarily in trading Lillard for just anything, but seeing him get a fresh start, and I think he deserves to play in May. He deserves to play in May and June and things like that, just because of the player that he is. And Portland can't be the one that gives it to him. So going somewhere else might be the best situation for both parties.
Well, you wouldn't have heard him name other teams either. Look at Jaylen Brown. Jaylen Brown is rumored to be somewhat discontented in Boston. And granted, he has money on the line, so he has to be a little bit more circumspect. But when asked about all of that, Brown said, I'm just really not going to talk about that right now. We're going to see what happens this summer. And that's the most discontented non-answer. The normal non-answer is, I'm with my team right now, and that's where I foresee myself being, and next question. Those options are still available. Dame isn't taking them anymore. He's naming teams, right? So, there has been movement in this discussion already. Yeah, the Blazers now have a little bit more urgency, I think, in that they don't just have to move from neutral. They have to stop the momentum that is happening right now and turn it around the other direction. And that puts even more burden on whatever they do next. Now, another thing that came up this week, possibility, okay, let's say that Charlotte goes with Brandon Miller, number 2, which means Scoot Henderson, who was the consensus number 2 pick 6 months ago coming into this draft. I mean, he was the guy. And in fact, for a nanosecond before they actually showed up on the court against each other, Henderson versus Wemby was a debate. Okay. It's not anymore, but that's how highly Henderson was regarded. Possibility of him slipping to number 3. If the Blazers were to select him number 3 and keep him, the question is, could he and Damian Lillard find a way to play together? What do you think?
I think they could. You know, professionals, they kind of have to do that. It's something they have to do. I don't think that it would last a very long time. Just because of, like we talked about with Lillard saying he wants to win now. And that's a situation where you kind of got to develop a guard and then let him get some time to get going. And it's just better to kind of start fresh with, I guess, him and Sharp and guys like that. But if they were to play together, I think they'd be a very similar to what we've seen production-wise from Lillard and Simons, where they'd be, you know, a dynamic offensive grouping where they combine for 50 or so points every single night and have highlights and Twitter mentions every single night when they play. I think it'd be fun, but I worry about what defensively what that would look like. Perhaps even more so just because of the fact that, you know, Henderson's 6'2", and no matter how hard you play at that size, you know, you're going to get picked on. They're going to target you in the pick and roll and things like that. And Lillard's the same way. So I worry about that defensively. It doesn't do anything as far as, you know, what the front office has said about, you know, getting you know, more athletic, more defensive, or not more athletic, but more defensive minded, and things like that. So I worry about that. I think it'd be fun. But we've seen what fun looks like. We've watched that for years and years and years, and it just hasn't translated to wins. So I don't think it translates to any more wins than we've seen already.
Well, even on offense, can Scoot shoot? I mean, if he can't hit a three-pointer consistently, he can't play off-ball, right? Because his forte is with the ball in his hands, making incredible moves, pull-up jumper, get to the rack, that kind of thing, right? Now, there is some room. C.J. McCollum did some of that, but C.J. McCollum was also one of the most phenomenal mid-range players of his generation when he was with the Blazers. I mean, that was literally his game. Scoot playing off-ball with the ball in Lillard's hands seems like a recipe for a bunch of missed three-pointers, which is going to, A, take away from what Scoot does best, B, inhibit his growth and effectiveness with the team, which is the opposite of what you want to do with your shiny new lottery pick, right? So the only way I see that working is if Scoot actually takes over point guard roles and Dame plays more off ball. Not entirely, but the balance would shift that way. But then how long is Dame going to put up with that, especially if the team's not winning? He's going to take over, yeah? So, like, you have this weird kind of two guys trying to get through the same doorway going opposite directions, both go left, both go right, both go left, and you try to figure out how to walk through the stupid doorway, and you can't quite manage it.
Yeah, basically just the way you said it. I think it'd be a recipe for disaster because I don't think that, you know, for as many points as they would score, they would probably give up as many of those points right back. And then on top of that, you know, I think Lillard had a fantastic season as an off-ball player last year. But in the four quarters of games, you know where that ball's going. It's going to be in Damian Lillard's hands. And he's going to be out there making the big shots for him. So if you got Henderson out there and teams are able to kind of shade off of him and double Lillard and force the ball out, it could be problematic. So I don't think that it would be a long-lasting pairing. I think if you do get Henderson, if you do get that number 3 pick, I think it's just 1,000% time smarter to just go ahead and deal Lillard and go with Henderson and Sharp and Simons and see what you get there and live with that, as opposed to trying to usher in an age with new and old at the same time and kind of conflicting their different strengths and whatnot. So I think it just makes sense. It'd be fun to watch, but it wouldn't be productive from a team aspect, I don't think.
And then what? You put Shaedon Sharp at small forward if you keep Lillard and Scoot. And then, I mean, Shaedon Sharp has the potential to become a good defender, but he can't defend yet. I mean, he's just not, he hasn't got enough reps. So now you have defensive problems at shooting guard because of size and at small forward because of size and experience. And your best defender in the smaller three positions is probably Damian Lillard himself. Yeah, that's okay. That's crazy talk at that point. So that's going to be interesting if the Blazers' hand gets forced that way. Okay, Scoot, you know, we really do think he's a revolutionary player. We got to take him, but we can't we can't continue on with them. Maybe I'm overstating it. I think they can do anything for a year. But dang, if you know at the end of the year that you're going to trade Dame anyway, you probably should trade Dame while he still has max value and as young as possible so that you can get the best return.
100%. He's coming off a third-team All-NBA, and based off what he said in the interview, he still thinks that he has a lot more years left in his prime. And I think Portland can maybe, leverage the fact that he doesn't have a lengthy injury history, as he said. And he's a guy that I think he can still be a 30-point scorer over the next 2 or 3 years, the way he plays. So I think it's a situation where if you have Lillard, Scoot Henderson, and you have Sharp, you're going to end up hindering, 2 of those guys' growth and their confidence. And I don't think you need that at this point in time. So it's better to just kind of go ahead and make that move now and live with the results with it. I think you have it'd be a lot of fun, even if it didn't translate to wins with that grouping there with Henderson and Sharp, and maybe you trade Simons too and get bigger there too. But as you said, I don't think Sharp at the three position is the best thing to do at this point either. He's got to build strength, and get better there too. So it's just a lot of different negatives that come with having Lillard, Henderson, and all those guys all together like that.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask. It's like trading Anthony Simons on the table then. And do you look at a lesser trade for some of these teams that wanted Lillard, and you're not asking for future unprotected draft picks back, but like a Nick Claxton, would you be interested in someone like him or whatever, to bolster that front court? And you just figure, okay, we're going to have a hyper-athletic backcourt of Henderson and Sharp, and we're going to build up the front court around them. And obviously we're not winning this year, but we're going to get another lottery pick next year. And, 2-3 years down the road, we're going to be pretty good. Now, again, you got San Antonio's already started their arc. You've got, Denver is not going anywhere. So there's a long road to climb to get to the top, but at least you'd be climbing at that point instead of wandering around on a plateau wondering where to pitch your tent.
Yeah, I think personally that's the best way to kind of build a starting lineup. You look at Lillard and McCollum when they were at their best and Portland was at their best. It was when they had a 3 and a 4 that could switch on the pick and roll and kind of cover up some of their defensive lapses. You had a rim protecting 5 and then just having defense that can kind of cover up their mistakes. And I think if Portland's building a team around, Shaedon Sharp, Scoot Henderson, I think you want to build it that same way, where you got a 3 and a 4 that are big and can be flexible and versatile on the defensive end, and 5 as well that can be athletic too. So in a perfect world, I think that's the way you would do it. And I think that's the way I would do it if I were Portland. You trade Lillard and Simons, you go get some guys that can kind of, guard the interior, some bigger guys, some size that makes sure your future a lot easier. But that's just my perspective on it. I think that there's a lot of ways you can go about it, but that's how I would do it.
Yeah, I mean, theoretically, wouldn't there be less defensive burden if Henderson and Claxton, Sharp, Henderson and Sharp develop like that? They should, in theory, be better defenders than Lillard and McCollum were, right? Yeah,
I think so, just because of the athleticism and the things you can do when you are athletic. I think it'd definitely be big. And I think if Portland kind of fits the bill right and they get those right guys around them, I think the issue with Lillard and McCollum was that there was so much pressure on them offensively, that they didn't have the energy to do everything they wanted to do on defense. Because I look back on some of those high-profile matchups with Westbrook and guys like that. They stepped up to those. They played really well in those, but, it's just bringing it every single night and having that energy where it's tough. And I think there'll be some growing pains with them being so young. And, we saw that with Sharp last year. There were times last year where Sharp wasn't good at all on defense, to put it most frankly. So you got to be ready for those. But if you can compare them with, guys that can kind of fit their athleticism and their size, I think it'd be big for them.
Yeah, I mean, and the nice thing about that is that if you forecast a generational backcourt with Henderson and Sharp, then you have Lillard, Simons, Nurkic, and maybe Grant to play with in future trades. Because either by age or position that they don't necessarily fit long-term the bill, there's nothing wrong with keeping them. But that's actually a lot of talent over the next 2 years that you can forecast exchanging into, other players who can really help you and bolster that front court. Like I said, I mean, I slipped and mentioned Claxton again, but I think he would be a real good get, right? Because, I mean, he's 23, 24 years old, and he's a shot blocker, a pretty good defender, really efficient in the front court offense without having to take shots. So, I mean, there would be a good piece. There are others, right? And it's like, okay, well, that route seems to open possibilities, yeah? If you tell me I'm going to have a fantastic lottery picked, hyper-athletic, perhaps generational, and people have mentioned Kobe in regards to Sharp, and then obviously Henderson is hyped. If you tell me that's going to be my backcourt, and I've got 4 veterans to trade, I can live with that, I think.
Yeah, I like what you said about Claxton, too, about him being a guy that doesn't necessarily need to take a lot of shots. I think if you're going to have Sharp and Henderson and guys like that have that trigger-happy kind of offensive play style, you want to have the right kind of guys around them, too. And I think we're on the same page. We want to kind of see the Blazers make a pivot into something. You don't want to keep going young and old, or you want to see them build an entire roster with just old veterans and trying to chase the championship. I think it'd be a breath of fresh air to see them kind of go completely youthful. And I think back to that 2006 draft when they brought in Brandon Roy and Aldridge in the same year, and fans, I think, kind of understood, you're not going to win right away, but in a couple of years, you've got something special there when they're 24 or 25 and they're getting their first playoff runs and things like that. I think it'd be fun to see. But as long as Portland makes a clear-cut decision, I don't think there'll be too much anger, too much angst in either way it goes. But I think that the more beneficial one at this point might be to go ahead and go youthful.
Yep. Well, we'll have to see. We are going to be, let's see, 1 week from the draft next time we talk. We may have to podcast a little early next week. I'll talk to you about that off air. But the limbo is almost over. We are 2 weeks away. Next week, we'll be talking about draft prospects, probably whether the Blazers use or trade that 23rd pick. And, of course, who's going to be available at the top. Until then, this is Sneezy Dave Deckard for Marlow Ferguson, and we will see you again soon.